Okay. Now, today we're getting into the Amazon module, and one thing that means is that if you're doing packback, your questions should now be on Amazon. And just like Facebook, you can do any business aspect of Amazon. So if you want to talk about tech, that's great. If you want to talk about accounting, finance, HR, general business management concerns, that's fine too. But again, any new questions at this point should be about Amazon. You can, of course, still respond appropriately to older Facebook questions if you want to. Okay. Now, before we get into this lecture, I want to talk to you about grades because people are historically concerned about grades. So let's discuss that. IDS 200, grades, and you. So breakdown in a typical semester, the cutoff for a C would be around 640 points. Okay. Now, in lab, there's 300 points for lab. Lab attendance and assignments, there's 300 points there. And honestly, a lot of that is just showing up, right? There's no reason why anybody shouldn't get the full 72 points for the 12 lab exercises, because all you got to do is show up and do them. And at some reasonable point, turn them in. Likewise, the homework assignments, there's not any reason why people shouldn't get most of the points. Seek help if you need it. But again, it's there, you have time. As long as you're turning them in, you should get most of the points. So I'm going to say probably should get greater than or equal to 280 points. And there's like 10 points of extra credit probably in a later assignment as well. So again, getting 90% on that is absolutely feasible. Most students do pretty well on the lab, except for the ones who don't turn stuff in, because those zeros are hard to overcome. Likewise, for packback, worth 100 points, but should get 130 points, right? There's no reason why anybody couldn't get 130 points on packback, right? It's not too hard to join in the discussions, and if you do the work, you'll get the points eventually. So that means that's 410 points there, which means on the 4 exams, you only need a total of about 230 out of 600 points to get a C. Okay, that's about 40%. You'd have to, that's not much better than random guessing. So what I'm saying is, if you've heard from anybody that this is a terribly difficult course and they told you they got a D or failed because, it's so hard, I'm just telling you, this is the point breakdown. If you show up and do the work, it's really hard to get below a C. Okay, now, again, as always, some students are determined to do that to get below a C, but that's not my fault. Okay, now as far as getting a B, obviously you would need 100 more. Okay, well, let me say, typically a B is around, let's say, 750 points. So in that case, you'd need plus 110 points on exams equals about 340 out of 600 points. Again, a little less than 60%, right? You don't exactly have to ace the exams as long as you're doing well on the other aspects of the course, okay? Now, I would hope that most of you aspire to get better than a C, but I'm just saying it's really easy to get a C, and if you don't, that you're doing something wrong. And anybody here, if they put in the time and show up for lectures and pay attention, 60% on the exams. I know the exams are hard, but 60% is absolutely achievable. In prior semesters, 60% would have been a bit below the class average, right? So class averages were typically upper 60s. So just saying. Okay? And would anyone like to know more? Yeah. If you miss 1 week of packback, you still get the full 130 points? Yes, you can earn up to 15 points per week in packback, and there's actually a 14-week window of participation. So you can miss several weeks and still get the requisite 9 weeks, because 9 times 35 is 135 points. So yeah, if you miss a week, yeah, Slack is built into the system. Yeah. Other thing? No? Yeah. Whoever. Yeah, either way. Go ahead.
With lab, you mentioned that pretty much most of the points are going to be
Well, it's 72 points for lab exercises and attendance, and 228 points total for assignments. Yeah, like the one that was posted on Friday. Yeah. So again, that's your 300 points, and you know people should get it. Yeah.
I know this was probably explained before, but how many questions do we need to pose to get a 15 chance?
You can post up to 2 questions and up to 4 answers per week. Each question that's above the threshold score is worth 5 points. Each answer that's above the threshold score is worth 2.5 points. You can mix and match those any way you like to get your 15 points. So you could do 2 questions and 2 answers. You could do 1 question and 4 answers. Guess that's it. Packback is built to not give you credit for more than 2 answers, not more than 2 questions or 4 answers in a week, though. They have some weird strictures there. Did you still have a thing?
No.
Okay. Yeah.
On backtrack, it says you can get up to 20 points.
Yeah, but that's I manually cap it at 15. Yeah. Anyway, I'll start posting the scores probably after this week. Just, you know. Yeah. Packback is also not, you know, is also not set up for me to just tell Packback, hey, I'm going to cap this at 15 points. What it lets me do is say how much the questions and the answers are, but it's still set up, you know, there's like a stock formula. If you can do this many questions, you can do this many answers, and it'll treat that as the assignment for the week, right? But I built in more flexibility than was intended in the system, and they kind of are having a problem with that. Maybe next semester they'll have added that as a feature, though. Yeah. Afnan, in her section, the Packback is a weekly assignment, last I checked. But I figured it makes more sense to, you know, let you have some weeks off. Okay. So anyway, that's it about grades. So what I'm saying is grades will probably be posted sometime between now and, I don't know, Thursday, maybe a little earlier. I'll pick them up on Tuesday, and we'll see how motivated I am to actually enter in the scores. I might have them done before Wednesday. But, you know, don't panic. As always, don't panic. Just, you know, do what you're supposed to do, and you'll probably be fine. Okay. Now today, again, we are into Amazon, the transaction processing lecture. And most of today is going to be like some big picture stuff about how Amazon is and how transaction processing is, just to give you some background for the rest of the module. Okay. So what we'll talk about is basically transaction scale, and we'll dip into a little bit of process and principles. So first, some background on Amazon. So about 30 years ago, 1994, Amazon was founded. And at that time, the internet existed, right? So the internet first was created, in a sense, in 1969 when they first connected some research operations together on the West Coast. But as far as it being like an everyday thing that most people had in their homes, 1994, most people didn't. I knew a few people who had one of the ISPs in those days, CompuServe, and they'd go there just to check their email. And it was kind of crazy because they charged by the minute. You know, you had like, so with your monthly fee, you know, you got so many minutes. And then if you went beyond that, they charged you by the minute, just like an old timey long distance call. And the weird thing about the internet in 1994 is there just wasn't a whole lot to do on it. I mean, it's not like it was today. So unless you found some weird little group of like-minded people that you could talk with, you know, yeah, I didn't have much use for it. And at that time, Amazon was launched as an online bookseller. So Jeff, you guys know who I mean when I say Jeff? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so Jeff had this idea, and he wasn't the only one, but, you know, he had this idea. Jeff thought it would be a great opportunity to sell commoditized goods over the internet. So the first thing we got to talk about is what we mean by a commoditized good. Okay, so this isn't a professional textbook definition. This is a working definition for IDS 200. And for that, commoditized, I don't know why I'm having so much trouble spelling that or typing it. Commoditized goods are those that you don't really care where you buy them, because it's the same good. Okay, so for example, if you go to McDonald's to get a burger, it's going to be a little bit different from the burger you get at Burger King or the burger you get at Wendy's or the burger you get at Five Guys, right? And everybody might have their favorites or least favorite out of all of those, but they're different kinds of burgers. They're qualitatively different. It matters where you go. But things like books, you don't really care where you get the book from, right? If you're, say, looking for a 12th edition of Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, you don't care whether you got it at Walden Books or at Amazon or Borders or Barnes and Noble, whoever, right? It's going to be the same book. So, consequently, commoditized goods, good sellers, compete on order fulfillment, right? Basically on delivery. And they all have their different attributes. For example, you buy something online in 1994, it was going to be a few days before it got to you, but there wasn't going to be any sales tax. And you knew it was going to be there. You go to a regular bookstore in 1994, a physical bookstore, there's going to be sales tax. There's a decent chance, depending on how obscure a title it is, they might not even have it, you know. But on the other hand, if they do have it, then hey, it's right there and you walk out with it that same day. So things like that become what's different. Anyway, typical commoditized goods examples from 1994: CDs, DVDs, VHS tapes, books, right? These are all things that it doesn't really matter where you buy it from, it's gonna be the same product, okay? So he thought this would be a great thing. Now, the next question is, what are the pros and cons of selling over the internet circa 1994? Let's talk. You know, for those of you who weren't there, which I guess at this point is probably most of you, maybe every one of you, I don't know. But the idea in 1994, you could probably figure out some things. There's not that many people on the internet, but what are some pros and cons that you might, what are some pros and cons today, for example, of selling over the internet versus selling through a physical store? So I'll put that as a con. Not many buyers yet. What do you got? What do you got? What's something good about selling over the internet?
Bigger market.
What's that? Sorry.
Bigger market.
Excellent. Yes, bigger market, right? The technical term you often hear for that, worldwide reach. Anybody in the world could potentially come to your website and buy through you, right? Not really true with a physical store. Nobody's coming from the other side of the world, you know, to buy at the Walgreens downtown Chicago. Just doesn't work like that. What else? Yeah. Saving time. Maybe. I agree though. So let's bundle that up as convenience. And when we say convenience, we mean a few specific things, right? So we mean no trip to physical store and open 24/7, right? We'll say that for convenience. Because you could argue in some ways, right? In some ways, there's a convenience factor to going to a physical store too, depending on your point of view. What else? Other pros, other cons. Yeah. Oh, back, yeah.
Maybe pro might be that it's not as regulated, so the companies can maybe have more freedom with their product.
Oh, interesting. I'll accept that. Let's say freedom to innovate, right? But this is true of new companies generally. So, but by definition, in 1994, any online company was going to be a new company, and the competitors were these, you know, big book selling operations that had a lot of processes and different priorities built in. For example, not a legislative issue, but the big reason why the big guys like Barnes and Noble and Borders, they didn't actually try hard to sell books online is because they said, well, you know, we're already winning the physical bookstore race. if we go and try hard to sell books online, we'll just be cannibalizing sales we'd already be making in our physical stores. What's the point? And so, and you could have a certain amount of sympathy for that viewpoint. It's not entirely wrong, but look where they are, where Amazon is. Okay, yeah.
Sometimes a lot of products you want aren't in store.
Excellent. Yes. Right. So here I'm going to link that together. Limited storage space, and I'll even say limited presentation space. There are only so many high profile spots where you can put books, right? And I'll say here for pros, worldwide reach to publishers. Now, of course, if you go to a physical bookstore, right, and you're asking for some oddball book, like some oddball book, whatever, how to design your own wireless mouse, and they say, well, we don't have that in stock right now. We can order it for you. And you'll be like, well, I kind of just out at the mall this one time, and I was hoping you guys would have it, and yeah, it's kind of a big trip for me to get back. I guess I'll just go buy it online. Thanks, though. Right? Whenever they offer to order stuff, most of the time people say, nah, it's okay, whatever. Okay? But with Amazon, you go there and you expect, yeah, they have this worldwide reach, and sure, one of the cons of selling, oh no, I put this in the wrong spot. I'll say right? Because I meant that for physical stores. I got a little lost in what I was talking about. Unlimited storage space, presentation space. Whereas physical stores certainly have that problem. Okay? One of the cons, another one, people don't fully trust online buyers, right? You can add no real reputation for new stores, right? Guarantee of substantial shipping delay, right? It's going to take a few days to get to somebody at best. So there are some pros, there are some cons. One more big one that I'm going to add, big pro of selling online. What sort of crime is associated with retail stores? What? Shoplifting. The technical term is shrinkage. All right? Yeah, inventory shrinkage. So, not just shoplifting, of course, is for customers who come in and lift stuff, but of course, employees can do it too. And I've known people who worked in bookstores who stole enough books to make a small, well-stocked library. So, yeah, it does happen. Whereas with Amazon, stealing is wrong, by the way, don't do it. But with Amazon, one of the things, they have people in the warehouse, but it's a lot harder for somebody to walk out of a warehouse, that's constantly under the eyes of managers and cameras and everything. And, they can have security checkpoints where they check people on their way out and stuff. It's a lot harder to wander out with books than it would be at a physical bookstore. So employee theft in particular is going to be minimal to nothing. Shoplifting and employee theft, basically non-issues. Okay, and that's a huge pro as well. Anyway, good thing, all of these pros, they weren't going away. These cons, this wasn't going to last, right? Internet usage was rapidly growing, like doubling every year or more in 1994. With time, people would start to trust online, I shouldn't say buyers, it should have been online sellers, right? People don't fully trust online sellers. I'm going to correct that. But that's going to change. No real reputation for new stores. Well, guess what? If Amazon gets a good reputation for order fulfillment, they'll earn that good reputation. Word will get around. Guarantee of substantial shipping delays. Yeah, that was the last one. They really only fairly recently fixed that, right? It used to always be a few days, but once they started doing Amazon Prime and started getting enough traffic, enough sales, especially in urban areas where they could run fleets of trucks, now a lot of times you get same day service, right? It can be almost as fast to deliver from Amazon as it would be for you to get in the car and drive across town to pick up something, which is crazy. But here we are. Okay. So anyway, the pros weren't going away. The cons, probably were, it was a really good forward-looking idea. Okay. Now, having said all that, if Amazon hadn't been the winner, in the great online retail wars of the 90s, some other company would have, because the big thing with an operation like this is as it gets bigger, it gets more and more economies of scale. So for one thing, they have to design the website. They have to design all the platforms behind the website for order fulfillment, all of that. Once they've designed those and they've got them operating, they can keep using them in different areas. For example, if they have a really good relationship with book publishers and they have good order fulfillment and everything's fine, everything they have as far as their operations and lessons learned, everything, they can apply that to when they start selling CDs, DVDs, right? VHS tapes, whatever. It's all the same kind of stuff, right? Sure, they'll be contracting with different people, but the operation will basically be the same. And so again, economies of scale. As Amazon gets bigger, we'll talk more about that. That's fine for now. But big thing, as Amazon grew, it started needing new systems to manage its scale problems. So let's talk. Now, you guys may not know it. Probably don't. I can't imagine why you would. But in its early days, Amazon was doubling its sales every month. So let me ask, if Amazon hypothetically sold X books in January 1994, how many books did it sell in January 1995 with that monthly doubling? It will not ask you a question like this on the exam, right? This is an exponentiation question. How would we describe it? If we know we X and we double X 12 times, what does that become? X times what? What? More than 12.
X to the power of 12.
Not X to the power of 12, because that would be X times itself 12 times. It's not that big, but it is very big.
X times 26.
All right. I see exponentiation is not really people's thing. That's okay. What it is, that's okay. I'm not being mean. I hope you don't. It's 2 to the 12th. 2 to the 12th x, right? So 2 times itself 12 times. That's how many it's doubling. And then you multiply x. So in the first month, it's 2 to the first time, 2 to the 0 times x. The next month, it's 2 to the first times x. The month after that doubles again, 2 to the second. All right, this is not a math class. That's fine. But 2 to the 12th, it's 4,096 x. Means if they were selling 4,000 books in January 1994, which is like enough to make a little bit of money, they had to deal with selling 16 million books a year later. So everything they're doing has to be vastly bigger, right? Their website has to handle more traffic, right? Need more workers and machines for order fulfillment, right? They got all the things that they box and tape and everything. More warehouse space. Bigger database systems. So when they first started out, Jeff was basically using an off-the-shelf copy of Excel to track everything. But, it gets 4,000 times bigger. That's not going to work anymore, right? They start needing new specialized systems pretty fast. Okay. All right, so all that kind of stuff. Now, in its early days, first 10 years or so, Amazon was overwhelmingly focused on retail, right? Selling ordinary physical goods. So it started off with books, branched off into other commoditized type goods. But eventually, Amazon said, yeah, you know what? The future might kind of be digital stuff. So we got to sell that too. Things like music downloads, things like Kindle, downloading books. Of course, Amazon Video for streaming now. That's one of the big players in streaming video. So yeah, at some point they needed to say, well, we have these, our retail stuff is working fine, but we have to do a different kind of retail. Now, as Amazon got super big, they eventually actually had to start designing their own custom hardware, their own custom network systems. Reason is, nobody else in the world had the same kind of problems that Amazon did. They were way bigger than anybody else, and they were growing a lot faster. So problems that, would arise for a business that is, experiencing slow, steady growth, yeah, they can have a lot more patience. They designed their systems differently to work well right now with the knowledge that, yeah, maybe a few years down the road we'll have to expand it. Amazon had to build their systems with the understanding that we can't, focus so much on optimizing it for today. We have to design a system that's going to be very easy to add new hardware in, very easy to expand, and we're going to have to keep expanding it for the foreseeable future just to keep up with demand. All right. So that was their big problem, was scalability. Now, one popular misconception, or at least it used to be, not sure if it still is, so people understand that Amazon is a retail operation, and because it's a retail operation, retail sales have their own particular daily rhythm. For about half of the day, they might be kind of busy. The other half of the day, most of their customers are asleep, and there's not much going on. So somehow people got the idea, people who didn't really know how this sort of stuff works, they thought to themselves, wow, well, that makes sense. Amazon's got a big system. It's really busy for half the day. The other half of the day, it's pretty quiet. So maybe that's why, Amazon started renting out excess capacity in all of its systems as part of its first entry into the cloud services business. But in fact, with Amazon, behind the scenes, even though it's not busy as far as customers, there's a lot of behind the scenes stuff that has to happen. Things like database accuracy checks, right? Cross-checking to make sure your databases are all correct, giving machines downtime so that you can install patches or new software, reconfiguring the system to add on new machines. All sorts of stuff like that is always going on behind the scenes there. So there really wasn't ever much idle capacity in their system. They were actually struggling pretty hard to keep up with demand. And if you're interested in some of this stuff, some of these networking and systems issues, there's a little article there if you want to check it out. That's all right. I'll understand if you don't. But yeah. But again, if you're thinking about being an IDS major or even an IDS minor, I've picked a lot of these supplementary articles that hopefully people might find interesting. Anyway, so right now, 2023, Amazon is a hybrid retail and cloud services business. It still gets most of its revenues from retail. Cloud services, last I checked, were like 13%, but that's from like 2021, so it might have, ticked up a notch since then. And we'll discuss eventually Amazon's transaction processing system, but they have a lot of other stuff going on. Even for processing transactions, with Amazon's cloud and with other people selling stuff through Amazon, the stuff that Amazon is selling from its own systems is a lot less than, all the other things that it's doing. Amazon selling stuff is still, it's not all selling it internally through Amazon, if that makes sense. It's like third parties posting up their products for sale through Amazon, which is a little different thing. Anyway, Amazon maintains competitive advantage by continuously innovating, coming up with new products, new features, and in general, building on its existing operations. So its operations today become the base for new possibilities in the future. So we saw this way back in the 90s when Amazon was able to dominate the book selling sector. By the end of the 90s, the Amazon's competitors were in real trouble. That enabled Amazon to expand into other retail sectors, right? All the things that they were doing with books, they could do with other commoditized goods. It's kind of funny, actually. So there was a window in the 90s where I was managing a convenience store, and we had a sales rep. He was a nice guy. He was our wine sales rep, one of our wine sales reps. Anyway, it was in the internet bubble time, like circa 2000. And he said, he had a cousin who was trying to run this online used book operation. He was trying to sell books, and he was having a little bit of trouble right now. But he, if I was interested in investing like 10 grand in his system, I was like, yeah, no, good luck with that. Yeah, if you missed the boat by now, the boat's gone. Sorry. Yeah. Anyway, so I didn't lose any money there. That was good. Okay, I found other ways to lose money, but yeah, not by giving it away. Anyway, other stuff. All the factors that Amazon developed to manage scale, they eventually formed the base of its cloud system. So the idea with cloud, we talked about a little bit. You have a bunch of different users accessing through a common point to find data that's located, kind of anywhere in the system. with Amazon, they have all of these third-party sellers selling things through Amazon, right? And early on, Amazon's engineers were spending a lot of time designing custom interfaces, right? Ways for applications to connect so that people on the outside could sell things through Amazon. And, there were a lot of fairly rigid formats for doing that. And at some point, the engineers saying, man, this is a lot of work. There's got to be a better way. And they decided to adopt more of a free form approach where the outside people could upload chunks of data that were somehow labeled internally. Things like if you're selling, for example, if you're trying to sell something through Amazon, one possibility is that Amazon requires a product name, and Amazon requires X pictures of X quality, and Amazon requires some other product specifications, right? And all that is included in the form that basically the online seller has to fill out. But at some point they say, you know what, we're going to give the people more latitude. They can kind of construct their own web pages. Sure, some things will have to be there, but other things there or not there, whatever. We'll have some processing of whatever lump of data they send, and then we'll see that it's good enough and we can process it into a web page. Well, that sort of idea that you're kind of letting anybody upload data in any kind of form and your system processes it appropriately. Once you start doing that, you really are talking about cloud. And it's not a big step to say, well, we've gone from third-party people selling specifically products through Amazon to third-party people doing all kinds of data storage and application hosting through Amazon, right? So basically that was the bit with cloud there. So again, these scale issues, it was a lot of work to design new custom ways for every different kind of person to sell through Amazon, and they allowed a more flexible approach, and eventually that transformed into cloud. Okay, now Amazon's revenues. If you look at this chart, as always, don't memorize the chart, but get an idea of what things are. This red line, the red line at the top that's way above anything else, that is their online stores, right? That's Amazon selling stuff, through publishers and other outside people. The second one, the next one's kind of a brownish gold. I'm not sure. I can't tell if it's brown or gold. Let's say it's gold. That is third-party seller services. That's outside people selling through Amazon, kind of like a buy it now auction on eBay, right? That's that. And the one below that, AWS, I think, is that blue? Green? I can't see. Yeah, it looks like dark blue. AWS, that's Amazon's cloud. So those are its big three things. And they have some other stuff in there like, advertising and subscription services, even a little bar there for physical stores. If you've been to the Ogilvy train station, they have one there. But it's big things, retail, right? Those two top lines all by themselves, would be the biggest, but you put them together and they're way bigger than anything else. And then Amazon Web Services is the next big one. This chart up here, you can see that since 2015, it's multiplied about by 10 relative to 2021. So it was doubling about every other year. So better than 30% growth per year, which is pretty fast. And the retailing has also grown pretty fast. Okay. Now, Amazon is really, 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 really big, right? 2021, it had close to $500 million in sales, representing about 40% of U.S. e-commerce, right? Not all U.S. commerce, not everybody buying anything, but the idea is if you're buying something over the internet, 40% of those dollars, were going to Amazon. On top of that, it also has the world's largest public cloud service. So by public cloud, we basically mean ones that anybody can show up and pay to use, but they got to pay to use it. So something like Facebook, sure, Facebook has a cloud where they show people's photos, but Facebook is free, right? They make money off of advertising. Likewise, Google has its own massive cloud systems, but G Drive, things like that, they're free. You don't pay to use them. Amazon, if you want to get on their cloud service, and a lot of businesses do, you got to pay to do that, and it is the largest of those. Now, because Amazon is super, super big, right, they get a lot of traffic, right? So, for example, on Prime Day, everybody knows what Prime Day is? Most important day of the year. Unless there's 2 Prime Days in a year, then it's kind of, I don't know. Anyway, Prime Day is super busy. Amazon has to process typically several hundred transactions per second. And if that doesn't sound too bad, I'll explain in a minute why it actually does represent a huge problem. So first of all, every transaction generates a whole lot of other online activity, right? People browse web pages, people click on things, whatever. People, click on thumbnails and scroll down to read reviews, all that kind of stuff. So every transaction entails a whole lot of other activity. Now, on top of that, your peak transaction rates. Remember the rhythm of daily retail sales. Amazon's probably busy for about half the day, not so busy the other half. So if Amazon is having several hundred transactions per second average throughout the day, at the busiest time, it's probably 2, 3, 4, 5 times that. Because why? Because it has to balance out for, the 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. hours where nobody's really online buying stuff. And every transaction has a lot of operations, including number one, the transaction itself, any supporting information for the web page, any browsing activity, people looking at different pages, whether they're, buying stuff on there or not, and a whole bunch of operations with other systems. So they say here, cascade of database operations with related systems. Now, this is actually a big deal. Let me explain why. And I'm going to connect it to what we were talking about last module. Okay. So this is a CPU. And I know that these days, a lot of people conflate the term CPU with a desktop. It's kind of jarring to me, but technically the CPU is just the big chip or cluster of chips on the motherboard that does all the heavy computations for the computer. So let me ask, what kind of memory might we find welded on to the CPU that could plausibly carry the acronym SRAM? Yeah, static RAM, right? What do we know about static RAM? It is so fast that you measure it in nanoseconds. Okay? So if we're looking at this is our system. What else do we know about static RAM besides it's super fast? Yeah. It can do super fast. There is a limitation to static RAM though.
So it can't do much, or it can't sustain computations for long.
You don't have large amounts of memory. You don't have large amounts of static RAM and still have it be fast. Okay? So if you have, you couldn't run Fortnite on static RAM, like in your graphics card, because, if right, it takes a lot of computations. You need, many gigs of memory to handle that. And it's just not going to work that well for static RAM. But if you had a very small database, conceivably one so small that you could store in a few megabytes, you could run it in static RAM and it would be blindingly fast and you could make everybody super happy with that, right? But what happens is your CPU is embedded in some kind of system like this. Your CPU is connected with a bunch of synchronized RAM. Now, synchronized RAM is still pretty fast. It's doing stuff, typically in microseconds, which is fine, because you can easily keep up with 600 transactions per second as long as all of this is in one machine, right? But what's a typical upper bound for a desktop in terms of RAM? Like if you were going to go buy a new desktop or a new laptop now, what would be the kind of the upper bound of RAM you might expect to see in it? Yeah, maybe 64 gigs. But yeah, I'm actually shopping for a new desktop now, so I see 64. But yeah, 16, 32, definitely, not a terabyte of RAM at this point, right? So if you have a big operation, you are no longer going to be able to operate that on one machine, right? Now, so there's going to be outside machines, right? Especially if you have multiple systems. So here, I'm going to mark this one internal system. If you have a system internal to Amazon and you can connect it with some super fast cable, and because it's all still internal, you don't have to go through a lot of security checks, right? It's like having the fast lane at the airport because they're like, oh yeah, we trust you, we know who you are, and zoom, traffic goes through super fast, right? So I'll mark here, internal connection, no security checks to speak of. I mean, there's going to be some, but data goes super fast. And in fact, there have been some experimental things, like as far back as 10 years ago, there were operations that were sending, a terabyte per second. So basically what that means is you could stream the entire series of Game of Thrones in a fraction of a second. And it wasn't just like, from one machine next to another, like, hooked up to each other. It was like over a mile of that kind of cable. So the technology for super fast data transfers like that absolutely exists. But you're only going to have that happen if it's in one place, right? If it's all under the same roof and under the same security umbrella. If you have external systems, so here's another box. External systems, they're going to be connected, but they're not going to be super fast. Those connections, right? Standard internet connection, delays in milliseconds, right? Because why? Because data travels slower. The external system might be far away. There's going to be security checks. The data is going to have to get packetized and compete with other kinds of data. This kind of standard internet transfer is going to be a lot slower, okay? So this is where we get to the whole thing about transactions per second being a problem. So suppose with Amazon, they want to follow, suppose every transaction requires 25 milliseconds, or let's make it 20. Suppose every transaction requires 20 milliseconds to complete, okay, because of that back and forth with whatever external systems. If Amazon is insisting on ACID properties, that means transactions are basically going to happen one at a time, right? One starts and finishes, the next starts and finishes, the next starts and finishes. It can only process 50 per second because 50 times 20 milliseconds is 1 second. You can get you're capped at about 50 transactions per second. So unless you find some way around one of these bottlenecks, there's no way you're going to be able to achieve the kind of speeds, the kind of transaction rates that Amazon supports. Okay, and this is why. If your interface, if it's all internal, especially if it's all on one machine, yeah, several hundred transactions per second is no problem at all, right? Any machine, any modern machine could handle that. You start interfacing with outside organizations and you have these much slower things, and you're trying to follow ACID properties and make sure that everything's totally isolated and sequential, yeah, not going to work. Okay, so they got to find some way to cut corners. Now, key takeaways from all this. So number one, Amazon is very, very, very big. You should already know that. Number two, scale provides tremendous opportunities for economies of scale, meaning life gets better when you get bigger, but Amazon also needed new tech and processes to handle that massive scale. Okay, so that's our summary kind of for this whole module. All right, I'll see you all on Wednesday. Maybe we'll have exam scores by then. What's happening? Okay.
The homework.
Yeah.
So